Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
A big move by Facebook, banning several accounts, and now there's new blowback from the commander-in-chief. President Trump's furious reaction to Facebook's action showcases that he is, I'm sorry to say, the InfoWars president. He is promoting the same alternative universe as InfoWars and sharing videos from repugnant characters. Now, InfoWars, of course, is that web show and website led by rageaholic Alex Jones. Full of fear-mongering and conspiracy theorizing, InfoWars tells viewers that the world is out to get them. Jones is facing multiple lawsuits related to his lies about the Sandy Hook school massacre and the murder of DNC staffer Seth Rich. But none of this seems to repel President Trump. InfoWars content is useful to him. InfoWars personalities align with him. He even gave an interview to Alex Jones back on the campaign trail. On Saturday, Trump went on a Twitter spree and said it's so great to watch this while sharing a video from InfoWars. He also repeatedly retweeted a guy named Paul Joseph Watson, one of the InfoWars figures who's been banned by Facebook. He also retweeted a strange video about Islam from a user named Deep State Exposed that buys into the QAnon theory. This is troubling stuff. A lot of it is troubling stuff. And at the same time, the president's decrying Facebook's action. Now, you may have heard about this. Facebook decided to block 6 users as well as InfoWars as an organization. The high-profile names include Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, who's been called out for his anti-Semitism, as well as Paul Nealon, who is a congressional candidate who also has clearly anti-Semitic views. So you can see here there's 6 people, there's 1 organization banned, and it's not just Facebook. Trump has also been complaining about Twitter, how Twitter sometimes suspends or briefly puts counts into a timeout period. He's complaining about James Woods, the actor and right-wing star, who right now is on a Twitter timeout. Look, the president is clearly trying to tap into conservative concerns about right-wing censorship, social media censorship. How real are those concerns, though? How legitimate is this? And how is Facebook deciding who should be banned in the first place? Joining me now to discuss all of this is CNN senior media reporter Oliver Darcy, co-host of the Fifth Column podcast Camille Foster, New York Magazine senior correspondent and CNN contributor Irene Carmon, and in Washington, Judd Legum. He's the former editor of the progressive website Think Progress, now the author of the popular information newsletter. Judd, let me start with you because you've talked in the past about the president and his relationship with InfoWars. What do you think you're seeing happen now as the president goes on these retweet sprees?
Well, Trump is doing this because he needs people to believe that Facebook is against him and that Facebook is biased against him, because that's the only way that he has the space to operate on Facebook. His campaign, the 2020 campaign, he put the strategist in charge of his Facebook strategy, Brad Parscale, is now the campaign manager. And they are instituting exactly what they did in 2016, which is a whole series of ads that are misleading. And so if they go after InfoWars for misleading content, if they go after Milo, if they go after any of these folks, he's going to be next. And so that's why he's doing that, because he needs to be able to draw he can't let them draw a distinction between what InfoWars is doing and what NBC or CNN or any mainstream media organization is doing.
even though what we get from InfoWars is conspiracy theory crap. I mean, right in the wake of the Notre Dame fire, Alex Jones was on there talking about whether it was arson, talking about how the rest of the media was lying to you about what happened. Oliver, try to distinguish for us between, when we talk about these topics and talk about these figures, why is it that the 6 individuals were banned by Facebook? What makes them different from others?
Well, these are very extreme individuals, and no matter what anyone tells you, they are extremists, and that's why Facebook decided to get rid of them from the platform the other day. And back to your point, though, about the InfoWars presidency, I want to know, and I tweeted this the other day, what is the difference at this point between Trump's Twitter feed and Infowars.com? InfoWars might have been banned from Twitter, but it seems to have found a new home over at Trump's Twitter feed. And while he's promoting and legitimizing this news organization, we should also talk about how he's trying to tear down credible sources for news, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN. He was questioning why these news organizations have the ability to be on Twitter and
why
Facebook.
Are they not banned?
Right, while saying that the InfoWars should be reinstated. It's nuts.
It is Monday, the 6th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. It's been another one of those weekends, folks. Yeah, I have to tell you, it's a little early for the Stollen, if that isn't the icing on the cake. And a fruitcake has been running the show for the last 2 years that he wants back. He wants those 2 years back because he's not using his whole strudel. Nope. That noggin is full of, I don't know, sugar water or something. I can't figure it out, and I don't want to. But he's going to great lengths to stay in power. He even floated the idea before he was elected that this would happen. And I'm not just talking about questioning the results of the 2016 election if he had lost. No, this guy cares nothing about America, and he never has. Okay, well, I am trying to trademark the term "I told you so." It's a little tough. It seems to be in common usage, doesn't it? But I told you so. Hey, what else is happening other than the fact that he wants 2 more years? Yeah, 2 more years. I think that's about the time that the supposed statute of limitations run out on his crimes. Some of his crimes, the major crimes. Something he doesn't know anything about the law because he's a crook. All right. Way to game the refs all these decades, Republicans. Really appreciate it. Of course, this is all get back for Watergate. This is the players and the B team that came after the Watergate principles. They've been fighting this war since then. What's the whole idea of the unitary executive is because, we not only caught them with their hand in the cookie jar, we busted them, charged them, prosecuted them, and ran them out of town almost on a rail. So this is all get back for that. And every single law that came up so that this would never happen again, as I said back in the day, is happening again because with those laws gone, it's business back to normal. As if all the money and power they've accumulated all these many decades isn't enough. It's never enough. You got Candace Owens out there calling socialists parasites. My God. Woman, you are the epitome of a parasite. And I don't mean just sucking up to people. I'm talking about actually grifting and living off other people's largesse. But hey, takes one to know one, as they say. What a weekend. What a weekend is River City Hash Mondays. It's so much of a weekend, we had to make a hash that is just beyond compare. And every weekend it seems to be this way. That's why it is River City Hash Mondays. We slice it, we dice it, and we put it up into something that is really quite gourmet for your gourmet pleasure here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What else have we had that's already happened here? Well, at the top, of course, Infowars may have been banned from Twitter, but they found a new home over on Trump's Twitter feed. Yeah, he's been going a little fruitcakey, tweeting about any number of conspiracy theories that exist out there in the world, not just the Bilderbergers. He likes the Bilderbergers anyway. He wants to be one of them, but they don't want him to be a Bilderberger because, really, come on. The guy's new money. He's the worst example of new money. Who wants that around? So, but, yeah, he's going off on every single InfoWars conspiracy theory that there can exist, and the Democrats better investigate themselves for impeachment. I hate to tell you this, Donnie, but we do. Because, unfortunately, we follow the rules to a fault. Why else would these delays in the subpoenas be occurring so we can negotiate with the unitary executive? F the unitary executive, excuse me. It's Monday, and it's been quite a weekend, and I'm a little peeved. Yes, indeed. Well, on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy today, we have a group of 7 Democratic senators who slammed the Trump Department of Justice for working to hide white supremacist terror. That's right. Oh, little tidbit here. Since California has, they're still attempting, I believe, to lift, or maybe they already have. They've lifted their rules that the backgrounds of cops and all the adjudications of cops who have been charged with any number of transgressions or offenses while being cops were always under seal because it would prejudice them to the public. Well, it turns out that this one cop, who everybody said was escalating the Oscar Grant situation that culminated in Officer Mersley shooting Oscar Grant in the back while Oscar Grant was handcuffed face down on the platform at the Fruitvale BART station. So this original officer who had punched Oscar Grant kicked another one of Oscar Grant's friends. Why? Because he was an aggressive, steroid-addled pug. And he was getting in people's faces early on New Year's Day. I was on that train going the opposite direction, going to work, had been on that train. So I think, when I think back on it, Oscar Grant and his buddies were on the train going back to Fruitvale when I had been getting to work late that night doing the night audit at the bed and breakfast at the top of Nob Hill. But one of the things that I noticed on my way to the city that night was really how aggressive the cops were. I was making a joke to a seatmate that I think they're pissed that they don't have the night off so that they could celebrate. And my seatmate reminded me, no, they're getting paid double time. Oh, holiday pay plus overtime. They should be happy. Well, I don't know. Maybe the money didn't make up for it. So this Officer Perone escalated the situation on the platform at Fruitvale. Actually, he escalated the situation before Fruitvale. Got off at Fruitvale, pulled Oscar Grant really off of the train for no reason at all. This is all documented by people's cell phones that the cops tried to confiscate, but they weren't able to find 6 of them. Packed BART car, New Year's Eve, earlier New Year's morning. Confiscated everybody's phones except for 6. Oops. So I'm sure the rules changed after that one, is that if you're going to be confiscating phones to squash an investigation, make sure you get every single one. But regardless, we know what happened. And now it's official, because since these records have been released to the public, this Perone guy, who was fired, by the way, no one knew why, no one could speculate because it was against the law. I'm sure that he probably went to Missouri and got a job there. Because, black people really do hulk up a lot more, and he was the perfect candidate to be able to work in their departments. I'm sure. I'm not sure about that, but I'm sure that he probably, if he was going to get a job as a cop again, it would be in Missouri. What's next up in the Bistro Cafe? Well, lending discrimination practices like redlining are set for a comeback under the Trump administration's new mortgage policies. Trump wants to take us back to the days when he would discriminate against black people in his housing with impunity and screw the Fair Housing Act. Screw it. Even though he paid the largest fine for violating it. This is all get back for that now, too. You know it. And Fox News viewers cannot help but unleash furious, racist hell after Los Angeles unveiled President Barack Obama Boulevard. Oh, they went out of their brains. They're a bunch of fruitcakes, too. Hey, Stolen, get the strudel. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the White House is panicking that the nation's least popular governor, Kentucky's Matt Bevin, yes, he is the least liked governor in the whole nation. Well, the White House is panicking that he could lose. They need everybody in place. And if William Barr won't answer Kamala Harris's questions, maybe the Inspector General will. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link monitored by Kelly Link, and please do engage there. We like that. If you would then look to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the link to the contribute button. Is it a button? Well, it's a link nonetheless. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, we would not only like that, it actually serves a definite purpose because it helps us mitigate the ever-increasing costs associated with being even an internet radio station, my golly. And we are also celebrating 8 years of continuous broadcasting. Yes, that's right. 24/7, 365 for 8 years. Wow. And the machinery has a lot of wear and tear, and we are saving our monies in which to be able to purchase some. And thank you to our contributors who, in some cases, have increased their contribution so that their recurring contribution so that we can affect that. Every bit helps. Thank you so much. Your generosity does not go unnoticed, and thank you. We're paying our bills. Right. And now we got to buy machinery. Yikes. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are so ever grateful that he does. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I try to get the links on social media posted right there in that window, maybe a little bit over. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, iTunes, YouTube, and wherever podcasts can be found out there within, yes, indeed, the millions of podcasts that are out there. And we're down in the W's. I could have made it A1 Cookbook West, but no. That would be too obvious now, wouldn't it? Go to the W's. We're right down there. Okay, let's get into this first offering here by Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media, by the way. A group of 7 Democratic senators are protesting changes made by the Trump administration that downplay the serious and growing threat posed by white supremacist terrorists, which also makes it harder to stop that threat. Well, first of all, Trump doesn't see it as a threat. He sees it as help. Brown shirts, black shirts, I don't know, thugs in the street, lone wolves, just a bunch of lone wolves doing God's work, all in tandem, by the way. In a letter addressed to Attorney General William Barr and FBI Director Christopher Wray, the senators, all members of the Senate Judiciary Committee, expressed their alarm at a major new change to the way the FBI and DOJ keep track of domestic terrorism. We are deeply concerned that the Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Investigation are not taking adequate measures to combat white supremacist violence, reads the letter, signed by Senators Dick Durbin, Cory Booker, Sheldon Whitehouse, Amy Klobuchar, Chris Coons, Richard Blumenthal, and Kamala Harris. During a briefing with DOJ and FBI officials, the senators revealed they learned that the Trump administration has shifted its approach to tracking domestic terrorism incidents to obfuscate the white supremacist threat because they need every vote they can get. Every single one. And I'm not necessarily talking about getting the white supremacist vote. Yeah, they need even those votes, but it's the work that the white supremacists can do in not only getting more votes for the Trump administration and campaign, but probably keeping other people who wouldn't vote for Trump from voting at all. Really? I mean, black churches burned just, I don't know, out of thin air. Lone wolf white supremacists, all working in tandem. Weird how that works. Previously, the agencies used 11 different categories for tracking domestic terrorism, including a separate category for white supremacist violence. But the new system has whittled those 11 categories down to just 4, including racially motivated violent extremism, which lumps together white supremacists and a freshly made-up term by the Trump administration, black identity extremists. And I got to tell you, it's a little jarring when you hear family members who are in law enforcement tout that term. And you tell them, you know, you ever heard of confirmation bias? It just sounds right, doesn't it, fella? It just sounds like it could be true. Black identity extremism. Why else would they rise up in Ferguson? Why else? Yeah, because they're extremists with black identities, and the next thing you know, they're going to want a reparations just before they kill us in our sleep. In 2017, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives called the term black identity extremists a classification that, quote, further distances communities of color from the law enforcement community, end quote. They said the term, quote, resurrects the historically negative legacy of African American civil rights leaders who were unconstitutionally targeted and attacked by federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies for seeking full U.S. citizenship under the law, end quote. Those are cops. So apparently, the few good apples don't believe that there's any black identity extremism. Was a term proffered to rile up the lizard brain racist base. To do what? March in the streets? Alan Pike of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Ash Mondays. Mortgage lenders will find it easier to discriminate against prospective borrowers under the latest quiet sabotage of financial industry rules proposed by the Trump administration. The new rollbacks take a two-pronged approach to undermining a relatively new system that's helped journalists and watchdogs identify prejudicial lending practices they characterize as modern-day redlining. During the Obama administration, the CFPB played an instrumental role in earning settlements against banks accused of racial discrimination. These changes would do harm to the agency's continued ability to be a cop on this particular beat. One proposed regulation would end mortgage data reporting requirements for relatively small lenders who issue dozens of loans per year, while leaving them in place for the industry leaders who sell hundreds or thousands of home loans annually. Lender allies have argued that these low-volume shops don't play a large enough role in the overall housing finance market to produce harmful macro effects, even if they were to use this new obscurity in nefarious ways. More than 1,000 different lenders would be exempted under the proposal, however, creating a scattershot jigsaw of unpoliced potential discrimination. Wow, I guess it's the equivalent of like going to a check cashing store. You know, the one where they'll give you like a small loan of, a few $1,000 maybe, or a few hundred. But the interest is like several 1,000% when you factor it out. It's so, yeah. They don't have any impact upon the overall banking industry now, do they? And if they don't, why are the big banks getting into the check cashing store biz? So you have a bunch of individual small loan mortgage types. Mortgage types. And they're out there, mortgage brokers is what I'm trying to say. Small volume, only issuing dozens. Yeah, there's no potential for corruption there. And if there were, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's only just a few, poor people going to them. And by poor, do we mean urban? And by urban, do we mean people of color? Now, before the Bureau was around to demand this data and crunch these numbers, there were plenty of consumer advocates who warned that benignly branded financial products, such as overdraft protection, were deceptive and harmful to vulnerable working families. But this loosely connected coterie of watchdogs often lacked the collective clout to bring miscreants to heel. And so anyone whose salary depended on applying skepticism to the efforts of consumer advocates, either out of philosophical free market earnestness or because they were specifically compensated to publicly take the financial industry's side, could ward off these criticisms fairly easily. The Bureau's robust effort to provide legible and comprehensive data, however, played a key role in illuminating the ways overdraft fees wallet people living paycheck to paycheck. How the payday lending business model is almost entirely reliant on trapping a large share of customers in never-ending debt traps, and the means by which mortgage and automobile lenders endeavor to charge Black and Latinx borrowers more than white ones with similar credit profiles. It is little wonder, then, that the Trump-Mulvaney campaign to destroy the agency from within is not stopping with the rollback of individual pro-consumer regulations propagated under previous Director Richard Cordray. They're also looking to bin all of the evidence that shaped those policies and flip the balance of informational power between working people and the well-dressed vampires who hunt them back in favor of private capital. T-Bog from Raw Story brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Fans of Fox News did not care one bit for the conservative network reporting that Los Angeles unveiled President Barack Obama Boulevard over the weekend, responding with a slew of racist slurs and attacks on the first, and so far only, black U.S. president. According to the report that set in motion a flood of vitriol that wouldn't be out of place at a KKK meeting, on Saturday, thousands gathered for the renaming of Rodeo Road to President Barack Obama Boulevard, a 3.5-mile street that runs through the historically black Baldwin Hills Crenshaw neighborhood. So T-Bog then has a sampling of preserved screenshots that he took before he figures they're going to be deleted, or the network shuts the comment section down, because they sometimes will do that even at Fox. That is fairly amazing to me. But there's so many, I am not going to go through them all. You'll have to go through them yourself if you'd like to be entertained, if you like entertainment that way, at the link provided at the show notes and links diary that I have posted at Daily Kos. So do that. All right, let's get on to our break. And when we come back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, plowing ahead. With the new movie Diane, older moviegoers get a gem and an outlier from Hollywood's usual demographic focus. The movie is the first narrative directorial project from writer-comedian Kent Jones, formerly of The Rachel Maddow and Daily Shows, and is a deep character study with the lead played by veteran Mary Kay Place. Diane lives alone in the Berkshires and shares a rich community life. All, however, is not perfect, as we soon learn. She has a son with drug problems, a dying cousin, and one big secret. But she's anchored by community work, especially helping at a kitchen for the poor. We get to know the stoic Diane character in bits of conversations at dinners, in hospital rooms, and in a bar during a curious retrospective journey with a fabulous soundtrack. The big reveal sort of slides in at just about the right time for you to put it in perspective. Between substantive scenes almost like chapter demarcations are long first-person shots of her driving through the rural wooded landscape, often at night and almost always uphill. Diane's drug addict son, played by Jake Lacey, alternates between substance abuse and Jesus, and a dinner scene where Lacey's character attempts to save Diane's soul is as uncomfortable as it is telling. Along with Place and Lacey, not enough can be said about the cast of mature character actors who form the community with whom Diane interacts. And then there's product placement, specifically books by Emily Dickinson, which are at Diane's bedside and on her coffee table as she addresses her diary. Dickinson understood this movie's story 150 years ago, writing, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without words and never stops at all." This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Lucy Wong. Mice and rats vocalize. To us, many of the sounds they make are ultrasonic, at too high a frequency to hear. But if we slow the calls down, they sound like squeaks. And not all squeaks are the same. The sounds that rodents make when they're excited versus disappointed can be quite different. For example, here's slow-down audio of a rat drinking sugar water. But this rat got played. It got non-sweetened water after becoming accustomed to sugar water.
Calls around 22 kilohertz are usually associated with unhappy affect, and calls around 55 kilohertz are happy affect.
John Neumeier, a professor of psychiatry and pharmacology at the University of Washington.
tickle a rat. It puts out a lot of 55 calls. If we give them a sucrose solution, then they put out a lot of calls at 55 kilohertz.
Being able to interpret these different calls can help researchers understand the rodent's emotional state, which could affect the results of the experiments on the animals. Of course, listening to rodents in real time eats up resources. To code 1 hour of a recording,
it takes 10 hours, because you have to slow these recordings down in order to be able to listen to them.
To automate the process, Neumaier's associates Kevin Coffey and Russell Marks used machine algorithms originally designed for self-driving cars to develop a software that they call Deep Squeak. The program takes recordings of the rodent squeaks and then plots them by frequency and intensity. By transforming the audio to a visual representation,
they were able to train the computer network to recognize what an ultrasonic vocalization looks like, and then to easily tell it apart from other kinds of noise.
The description of Deep Squeak is in the journal Neuropsychopharmacology. The researchers have made the software available to any other scientists working with rodents who could use this kind of analysis.
In my mind, it will democratize this kind of research so that people can afford to do it, because it's been a huge barrier.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Lucy Wong.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In 2017, approximately 1 in 6 high school students reported a sports or physical activity-related concussion. Immediate symptoms of a concussion include headache, nausea, and double vision. Long-term, the effects of such injuries, particularly those that are more severe, can be life-changing. Healthcare providers, coaches, trainers, and parents should be aware of the symptoms of a concussion and how to treat them. A concussion protocol should be developed that includes withholding an athlete from practice and competition until all symptoms are resolved. While concussions cannot always be prevented, they can be treated in a way that decreases the chances of long-term health problems. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Quote, on April 2nd, the Federal Department of Justice issued a horrifying report on Alabama's prisons that contained graphic accounts of prisoners being tortured, burned, raped, sodomized, stabbed, and murdered in unsupervised dormitories. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The just-quoted New York Times article went on to report that Alabama prisons are lousy with corruption, rife with drugs and sharp knives. They are crammed full of inmates, holding 2 to 3 times their maximum capacity. And the prisons are way understaffed. Officers often stand behind a barricaded, secure area and tell inmates who have fled to them looking for safety to go get a knife. Torture in Alabama prisons is not legal or constitutional, but it is and has been facilitated, condoned, sanctioned, and accepted. These conditions continue because people on the outside generally pay little or no attention, proving the maxim that prison walls are meant as much to keep the public and the press out as they are to keep the prisoners in. Here's an update. The Department of Justice has threatened to sue the state of Alabama and its prison system. And since the report was issued in early April, 3 correctional officers in that state have been attacked, and at least 1 prisoner has been stabbed. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the year that 400 black women who worked as tobacco stemmers walked off the job at I.N. Vaughn and Company in Richmond, Virginia. The tobacco industry in the South was highly segregated. The stemmers had to separate the tobacco leaves from the stem by hand. The job paid little, with working conditions that were extremely hot, cramped, and demanded long hours. Most of the stemmers were black women. The women found an ally in a new Richmond organization, the Southern Negro Youth Congress. The group was made up of young people who were part of the National Negro Congress, a national organization formed in 1935 to fight discrimination. According to historian Eric Gelman, the National Negro Congress held the belief that justice came from economic power. They emphasized union organizing of black workers. In Richmond, the young organizers of the SNYC began to make contacts with the tobacco stemmers. Out of that effort, the Tobacco Stemmers Laborers and Industrial Union was forged. 2 organizers, Christopher Columbus Alston and James Jackson, helped to lead the work with the stemmers. For many reasons, this unionization effort was indeed remarkable. For one, in the Jim Crow South, it was not expected that black women would organize to form a union. Richmond was also not a town known to be friendly to labor organizations. But despite these challenges, the women compiled a list of demands and presented them to management. Within 48 hours, they had settled the strike, gaining improvements in their working conditions. The women inspired others in Richmond, in Virginia, and beyond. Their fight was not just for better workplaces or higher wages, but also for dignity and respect. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labor.
This is a Radio Labor report recorded on Monday, May 6, 2019. I'm Mark Belanger. The United Nations agency focused on matters of work in the world is celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. The International Labour Organization, the ILO, was created in 1919 as a response to the horrors of the First World War. Representatives from governments, employer groups, and labor unions came together to create a tripartite organization. That means the 3 social partners, including unions, guide the ILO politically and managerially. The organization is strongly supported by the international labor movement. Guy Ryder, the Director General of the ILO, is a former General Secretary of the British Trades Union Congress, the TUC. He is the first unionist to lead the organization in its 100-year history. At a recent workshop of the Institute for Law and Justice in the United States, Mr. Ryder talked about the history of the organization and its efforts to renew itself as the world of work changes.
The ILO has had its ups and downs over 100 years. We've had near-death experiences on several occasions. The first would be when the League of Nations crashed in the 1930s leading up to World War II. The ILO survived by a sort of an adventure story miracle. We packed the office up, drove down to Lisbon, got the boat and did exile of the Second World War at McGill University in Montreal. The United States didn't want us at that point, so we went up across the border to Canada. That was one near-death experience. The second near-death experience was not an unpleasant experience, but when the UN came into being, I think there were thoughts about whether the ILO needed to be reworked or become something different from what it originally was. But the third near-death experience was actually, well, it was really the end of the Cold War. It was really the end of the Cold War, where basically we all remember the end of history sort of idea. You know, many people still saw the ILO as a protagonist, and that was its basic interest in the Cold War. You know, this was about taking on the Eastern Bloc conception of labour and how labour relates to the state. So once all of that was over, a lot of people, particularly on the employer's side of our house, said, well, what's the point of the ILO any longer? So we had to make a case for the ILO in the era of globalization that was then unfolding. And that was something very new for us, and it's not entirely comfortable for the organization. But recently, and I've been in the job now for about 6 or 7 years, it struck me, we're in a period when I think many people feel the world of work is undergoing transformative change. And this sounds, again, somewhat cliche-ridden, but with technology doing to the world of work what it is doing, with issues of climate change, issues of demography, there is a feeling that we have not simply to remain within the classic parameters and concepts of industrial relations as I grew up in. We have to look at the nature of work and the meaning of work in society, because it's quite possible that work will be performed in ways which do not properly or easily fit in to the established concepts of labour and the institutions of labour that we, in the ILO, has been instrumental in this, have created over a century. Such fundamental questions are now being asked about how work is to be organised, not just the quantity of employment available, but what the organisation of work will be, and how the social provisions we've made and the institutions we have developed will or will not be apposite to the new world of work that's been created. And there's a bit of a chicken and egg in all of this, because basically I do think that the institutions we have, properly adapted, can shape the world of work that we want. And they don't have to be the passive variable in change at work. But there is an interesting dialectic going on here between the way the world of work is moving and the capacity of our institutions to shape it in the direction that we want it to go. So yes, we talk more about, and it's the key issue of the ILO centenary, the future of work, and properly so. But I wouldn't like you to run away with the conclusion that that means we're discarding or leaving behind us our proper responsibilities of industrial relations, because I think the two are not mutually exclusive. I think we're looking at how the two things fit together and interact.
And that's it. International labor news you can use. You can find our feature stories and daily newscasts at www.radiolabor.net. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. The UN warned on Friday that more than 10 million people in North Korea are currently suffering from severe food shortages following the worst harvest in a decade. The World Food Program also found limited dietary diversity in the country and families being forced to cut meals or eat less. And the proof is in the calories. North Korea's public distribution system, which supplies food to millions of citizens, has reportedly cut its daily ration to below 11 ounces per person. Steve Taravella is a senior spokesperson for the World Food Program in New York.
This is a country where there are shortages of fuel for farming equipment and shortages of parts for farming equipment. So on top of that, to have drought conditions and flooding conditions and heat waves that significantly reduce food output makes it really challenging.
Taravella says the WFP's focus is on feeding the hungry, not meddling in politics, though he did concede the nature of North Korea's operations makes feeding people more challenging than it could be in other settings. Oliver Rubin, an associate professor at Roskilde University in Denmark and an expert on famines, says that's an understatement.
This is a quintessential political famine in North Korea, and it will always be like that.
North Korean defectors have blamed the Kim regime for using food rations as a tool to control the population. And while Rubin says the UN has to balance condemning North Korea's government with wanting to operate in the country, he thinks there wouldn't be talk of famine in the first place had North Korea spent its limited dollars importing agricultural equipment instead of weapons.
Famine today is restricted either to North Korea because of its extreme sort of regime, or it can blossom in very sort of conflict-prone environments. These are the only pockets we have left where it's likely that a famine would be able to occur.
Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees. We are expecting a high of 83. Sunny throughout the day. Tonight we're looking at a low in the mid-50s with a few passing clouds. Right now winds are light and variable out of the southeast and, light and variable, 1 to 2 miles per hour. Picking up in another couple of hours, shifted out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Shifting then again out of the northwest, remaining at that clip. And then back to the north-northwest tomorrow at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Sounds like a good idea. Did I say we're going to have a high of 83 to 85? Maybe I didn't, but you know it again, or you know it for the first time. We're going to be warm. And looks like a high tomorrow in the low 80s, so which means it could be in the mid-80s again, too. Grass pollen is rated at very high. The air quality index actually has come down a few ticks in the good range at 24 parts per million. And the UV index, daytime UV index, actually has come down 1 notch to 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.68 inches locally. Visibility is at 10 miles. And relative humidity right now is at 70%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 54 and partly cloudy. Paris is 58 and sunny. Rome is 63 degrees and partly cloudy with a thunderstorm advisory that could knock out the electrical grid in Rome, and that sometimes does that. Kiev is 63 degrees and fair. Kabul is 75 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and cloudy. Tokyo is 63 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 65 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. Hey, it's sunny in the Big Apple, and I heard it was raining just yesterday. Well, that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Emily Singer of Share Blue Media brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Not counting the weather, of course. By all measures, Kentucky should be a safe place for a Republican governor to run for re-election. It's a solidly red state that Trump carried by a 30-point margin in 2016. Did he with some help or without? It doesn't matter. Yet GOP Governor Matt Bevin, or is that Bevin, is the least popular governor in the entire country, and Republicans, including those close to Trump, are terrified Bevin could lose in November and cause embarrassment to both the party and to the White House. In order to try and fend off a loss, Mike Pence recently held a fundraiser for Bevin in the state and will headline another fundraising dinner this Friday. Bevin is also set to air television ads beginning on Saturday that prominently feature Trump to try and boost Bevin's standing. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, I believe that they started this campaign this last Saturday, I believe. Could be. All right. So, started over the weekend. Bevin is also begging Trump to campaign with him in the state. Will Trump? We'll see. If a Trump ally in a state Trump handily won in 2016 loses re-election, it could show vulnerabilities for Trump as well as Mitch McConnell, who is also up for re-election in the state in 2020. Bevin's approval rating in the bluegrass state stands at an abysmal 33%, according to a recent survey by Morning Consult. And Bevin can thank his cringeworthy and offensive comments for that distinction. Last April, when teachers in the state were striking over changes to their pension plan, Bevin attacked those educators by accusing them of letting children be molested, poisoned, or even taking drugs while teachers were on the picket line. Well, at least they're not letting icebox baby gulag babies come across the border en masse so that John Kelly can make a bunch of money by housing them in icebox baby gulags. Well, Bevin never apologized for that, and why would he? He's Matt Bevin.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Oh, I wanted to mention two pieces of good news before we get into this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by Zach Ford out of Think Progress. First being is that my corn sprouted yesterday. It looks good, and it's starting to grow really fast now. Yeah. And at last tally, I didn't watch the whole show or keep close tabs, but my brother's show won an Emmy, so congratulations, bro. Senator Kamala Harris is calling on the Justice Department to investigate whether Donald Trump has ever asked William Barr to open an investigation into his political opponents. Barr this week was unable to answer Harris's direct questions on the matter, and her request comes as the Trump camp is floating a new attack on presidential candidate Joe Biden. Well, during Barr's testimony to the Senate Judiciary on Wednesday, Harris asked Barr whether Trump or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation to anyone. Did they infer, suggest? Remember that exchange, that tete-a-tete? Well, Harris called Barr's inability to answer her question an alarming response that strikes at the very heart of the rule of law and threatens to undermine the long-standing independence of the Justice Department. And she requested that he investigate, that being the Inspector General, whether Barr ever received or acted upon such improper requests, because that is an abuse of power. And do you see what Trump is doing? He's investigating Biden because that's get back. He thinks that Obama spied on him, not that really it was a counterintelligence investigation that occurred long before he ever became a candidate for anything. That counterintelligence program started when he married Ivana, and her dad was linked to the KGB. Let's be clear about this. All right, brings us to the end of this broadcast period for the day, but you know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.